My name is Seth. I'm one of the pastors here on staff, and I get to teach this morning on Christianity and technology. Christianity and technology. Here, just show of hands real quick. How many? So here's the options before I have you raise your hands. How many of you love technology, hate technology? Love technology, hands up. Hate technology, hands up. There we go. Love to hate technology, both hands up. There we go. That in a world where things are constantly changing and developing, the Christian story actually offers us the best balanced approach to Christianity than any other story does. That right off the bat in Genesis chapter 10 and 11, we get the story of how human rebellion culminates in manufacturing of new technologies that creates opportunities and problems for people. And so this love-hate relationship we have as a whole society with technology actually is explained by and demonstrated by the very first few chapters of the Bible. What we've been doing so far in Genesis, I want you to see this. I have a summary of the story so far. Is Genesis begins with this two-part story of creation, Genesis 1 and 2. God makes the whole world and it's very good. And then there's this interlude piece in the middle that's Genesis 3 through 11. That whole story is the rebellion story, the fall story, the breakdown story. And it builds on itself. First, you have Adam and Eve personally, individually, as a household rebelling against God. Then the spillover is into the generations, that there's hostility between brothers. So it begins with hostility between humans and God. Then it develops into hostility and breakdown between brothers, Cain and Abel. And then it takes a next step in a Noah's Ark where the whole of society is only following evil intentions of their heart altogether. And then the story we're in today is the cherry on top, the final piece of how a human society on the whole can organize itself with ways that are in rebellion to God. That's the story of the Tower of Babel. What we get into next week, right before Easter, is the story of promise. And that's the whole next part of the book of Genesis. So the book of Genesis really is in three parts: creation, rebellion, and next week we'll dive into promise, and that'll take us through the rest of basically through June-ish. But the culminating story of human rebellion against God has everything to do with technology and use of technology. So we have to understand here, first, as we're talking about the story, that here's a reminder for us that these rebellion stories, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah's Ark, and the Tower of Babel, are both records and warnings. They're telling us something that truly happened, and they're telling us about something that we're likely to experience in our own lives and in our own moments all the time. So these happened, and they're happening all the time. That the Tower of Babel is a true story, and a society organizing itself by means of technology to both create opportunities for connection and rebellion and destruction obviously goes on happening all the time. And so it's both a record and a warning to us. But the first thing we need to understand here is technology tends to develop in response to a problem. That's what technology is. It's an innovation, an improvement. It's basically impossible to separate technology from culture. If you went back and looked at ancient cultures, you're going to uncover these artifacts that are largely technologies or the products of technologies. Even thinking through this rebellion story so far, Cain and Abel, Cain kills Abel, and not in the Bible, but in Midrash tradition, what Cain uses to kill Abel is a plow spear. So humans had made this good thing, the plow, to develop the land, and then Cain takes that good thing, kills his brother with it. So the first iteration of technology is something good used for evil. Likewise, we see that development technology all the time. Nuclear fusion, how beautiful. Let's use it to kill each other. Fireworks, gunpowder, how beautiful. Let's use it to kill each other. Technology, it connects us to our loved ones across the globe through FaceTime. Let's use it to avoid the person sitting right next to us. We see the benefit, we see the cost, we see the high, we see the low, and even into Noah's Ark, here's a good metaphor for technology. What's technology? Is grapes, natural, wine press, technology, wine, technology. Wine makes the heart glad. Wine leads Noah into debaucherous embarrassment. Pro, con. The whole story arcs this way. Now, here's a problem we have as a church, and it's a good problem. It's the type of problem that churches pray for, is that too many people come here on Christmas Eve and Easter. I'm telling you, it's the best type of problem. But it's a problem. Some of you might remember on Christmas Eve, we had 4 services, and 2 of them were basically appropriately full. One of them was kind of low, and one of them, it was like no room at the end, no room at the inn, people standing and sitting around the aisle. And it was kind of tough. People came, no seat for me. I'm not sitting on the floor. What is this mess of a place? And they left. Tragedy, Christmas Eve. Technology is created to solve problems. And so we have this website, Easter at Redemption, Easter at ironwood.org. Like, I'm telling you, technology's largely huge. You're going to go, but the negative is I have to get my phone out in church and be distracted from the moment. And I might, whoops, I'm on Instagram. My point is technology can be used for tremendous good and tremendous benefit. And one of the things that we as leadership need for you all to do is to go on here and RSVP so that we don't have one service that's like this and people are walking away, and another service that's like this and people are like, nobody even comes to this lame church. So help us even it out. If you're going, I'm not sure which one to go to, I don't know which one is best for me, just go to the ones on the end, really early, really late. You'll help everybody else out. So that's the last time I'm going to harass you about that. Technology, good, also a difficulty. And so here's what we're going to go today is I'm going to talk about how in Genesis 11 there's this new technology developing, and that leads to some old temptations that we still deal with. And I'm going to talk about how we currently have all these technologies that are developing, and that creates new temptations for us. But in the midst of all that, we have the same God intervening, interceding, messing with our plans to self-destruct, and it's good for us. So let me pray, and then we'll walk through this. Lord, help us be good users of technology. Help us be grateful for human innovation and development, and help us be sober about the real cost to ourselves and to others. In your name we pray, amen. Amen. So in Genesis chapter 11, there's this development of a new technology that we don't necessarily understand as technology, but it is technology. It says, now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks. Now, you might be familiar with the story of the 3 little pigs, but there's the one who makes it out of twigs, and they make it out of something else, straw, and then they make it out of bricks, and it's like, that's the good one, right? So people, like, someone had to come up with both the technology to create and to use bricks. So let's make bricks and burn them thoroughly. Now this is good news. It says, and they also make bricks for stone and bitumen, that's like tar, for mortar. Now God put humans in the garden to subdue and have dominion. That is to cultivate, to make culture, to develop, to image God as he creates. That God is the creator. We remain God's image. We're called to create. We're called to take grapes and turn that into wine or grape juice, depending on how Baptist you are. And so we understand that we are called to make stuff with the stuff we've been given. We take unplowed fields and plow them. We take dirt and turn it into bricks. We take tar and turn it into mortar. And so this opportunity for technology arises. We should see ourselves as instinctively pro-technological development, because that is an ongoing affirmation that humans are made in God's image. To cease developing, to cease creating, to cease improving is to cease being part of the image-bearing community of God. This new technology says, let's build ourselves a city and a tower. These are good things. These are structures. We're going to create an environment for people to connect and to create and to facilitate. That the thick spread of the humans made in God's image into a place is meant to be an increased signal of reminder that God is Lord. You should see a room of a couple hundred people and see image bearer, image bearer, image bearer, image bearer. That a room that's a 10 by 10 versus 100 by 100 versus 1,000 by 1,000, that's different size containers for people made in God's image. There's something powerful and beautiful about assemblies of people made in God's image. The capacity to connect under a roof and through technology is a huge benefit. I don't travel very often for work, but every now and then, like I'm in London and I'm FaceTiming my son. Beautiful. My mother's in the Philippines right now, texting me prayer requests. Beautiful. People are at home for varieties of reasons, and they can tune in and watch you all go to church and watch me preach to you all, and they can listen to what's going on. Beautiful. You might be hearing impaired, and these speakers at least take the edge off the difficulty of that. Tremendous. We can gather in July and not sweat through our clothes. Magnificent. But the story doesn't stay positive. Pretty quickly, humans are beset with these old temptations. We see this right at the beginning of chapter 4. We're going to make a tower, a city with bricks, a tower with its top in the heavens. That's a way of saying we're going to make for ourselves the capacity to connect with God on our own. We're going to build all the way up to God's house. We're not going to be dependent on Him coming and visiting us. We're going to go and visit Him. We're going to be the initiators in this relationship. We don't need Him to condescend or come down to us. We're going to go up to Him. His space is not inaccessible to us. With the power of our technology, we can go where God goes. We can do what God does. And it says, and let us make a name for ourselves. We call this plagiarism. God says, I'm going to make these people in my image, that people would see each one of us and see a picture of God. They'd see the fingerprints of the author. They'd see the brushstrokes of the artist. They'd see the beauty of the beautiful one in his creation, that people ought to see us and be reminded of God's beauty. And instead, these people say, we're going to build and do great things and make a name for ourselves. Then the next verse is a key one. Lest we be dispersed over the face of the earth. Now, God had created Adam and Eve, said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth with my image, spread out over the whole earth, that the whole earth might be filled with reminders of my glory and of my magnificence and of my character and of my power. And instead of spreading out and filling the earth, they huddle together and build up. Instead of making a name for the Lord, they want to make a name for themselves and draw attention to themselves. This is both plagiarism, taking credit for somebody else's creativity, and it is abdication, saying, God has called me to do this, and instead I'm going to do this. These are the two ongoing sins that technology tempts us to all the time throughout all of human history. Tower of Babel is one gigantic selfie project. Look at me. See, this instinct to make a name for yourself, on the one hand, it's a good and holy thing to create something and then to have to sell it to people. I know in today's internet-based attention economy, you got to get people's attention, get their eyeballs, get their clicks, and then bring them to sell them things. And you got to be able to do that. On the other hand, there's this insecurity in us that when we don't feel seen by God, or we don't feel seen by our parents, or we don't feel seen by our communities, we go, I'm going to get seen by somehow getting myself out there and getting clicks. And the attention grab is medication for our sense of not feeling connected to God and feeling connected to the people closest to us. So we'll post our thoughts, we'll post our bodies, we'll post our controversies, we'll post our takes, all as a means of feeling connected through some type of internet scheme. Plagiarism and abdication. Like, I think about this with my kids all the time. It doesn't bother me as much when it's my children. You know, when I'm painting a picture with my son with watercolors, which, by the way, is like the worst instrument for actually painting things because it just bleeds and smothers. And I'll paint stuff, and then Jay will paint stuff, and I'll paint stuff. And there'll be like a basketball hoop and a basketball, and then like a bunch of 4-year-old smudges. And then Jay goes, Mom, I painted this basketball hoop. And there's a piece of me that's like, come on, you know? And there's a piece of me that's like, that's not very good anyway. You can take all the credit you want, Jay, you know? So, and it's It's cute when a child does it, but it's illegal glory stealing when an adult does it. Some of my people that I thought once were my favorite authors busted for plagiarism. It's like, oh my gosh, I got fooled, and it's kind of embarrassing. You get caught, and now there's like artificial intelligence that catches you for plagiarism in like 4 seconds. So it's like, how dumb do you got to be to try to do plagiarism? But when we say, look at what I made, there's a way in which we're stealing the glory from the Lord. That if God gave you skills and dispositions and capacity, then you got to understand that came from somewhere, and you're just using the gifts that God has given you. Now, you might have developed and cultivated and shaped those gifts that He's given you, but if you didn't have anything to cultivate, then you didn't have anything to cultivate. You can only play the cards you're dealt. God dealt you cards, and you're playing them. He deserves all the glory and credit for what we have going on here. Now, digital technology presents us with these new sets of temptations that are different than I think has ever been tempting for us in world history before. And so I think it's worth paying special attention to. The people in this story are to some degree tempted to this, but with digital technology, especially in the last 15 years, there's this new set of temptations. See, when they say, let us build for a tower with its top in the heavens, what they're aspiring to is this omnipotence. We're going to be like God. We're going to go to God's space. We're going to be in God's place, and we're going to go wherever God goes. But in reality, we understand that we cannot, even with the world's best skyscraper technology, we can't build a tower that reaches the sky. We can build one that reaches off of the earth, but we can't reach how it builds the sky. But now, with digital technology, you have this temptation to be everywhere all the time. So when we're talking about God's character, there are two types of characteristics in God. There's His communicable attributes, which is ways we're supposed to try to be like Him. God is love, we are to love. God is just, we're called to be just. On the other hand, there's these incommunicable attributes, which are ways that we cannot be like God, nor should we try to be like God. And those basically are omnipotence, being all powerful, omnipresence, being universally present, and omniscience, knowing all things. And our phones in our pocket tempt us like never before to believe that we can be omnipresent and believe that we can be omniscient, being everywhere and knowing everything. This is one of the reasons why I think we have such rapidly increasing issues with mental health in the world, but especially in developed countries, is that the human body, the human nervous system, the human mind was meant to handle this much problems, this much suffering, this much injustice, largely based on proximity and connection. But now you could spend your entire life reading stories of suffering and injustice all over the whole face of the earth, just finding yourself getting increasingly riled up and angry about all that's evil in the world when you actually have no ability or capacity to do anything about it besides fret and be fussy. And that creates anxiety. Not just appropriate concern, which is to some degree a healthy form of anxiety, but paralysis anxiety. And then you flip into depression because you're worried about all this stuff. Then you realize, I can't do anything about it. Maybe I'm worthless, and you become depressed. And so you oscillate between depression and anxiety, feeling over responsible for everything that's wrong in the world because you've filled your mind with all this information about all that's wrong in the world. And then you go, but who am I? I'm just a huge loser who can't do anything. And so the capacity to even be present to the people who are right close to you is inhibited and disrupted. Because here's how this works, is at any moment in time, there is somewhere in the world the most interesting thing in the world happening at that moment. And it's almost never the thing that's right in front of you. So, wherever you are and whoever you're with, there's something more interesting somewhere else. And you could find out about it right now. To my shame, I was playing with my son couple weeks ago, and there was a lull in the action, as happens with children. You're kind of going, this was fun, but I'm running out of steam on blocks. And I thought, I wonder how many points Devin Booker scored last night. So while Jay's semi-occupied, I'm like, I'm going to check how many points Devin Booker had. And then I'm checking how many points Devin Booker had. And then he sees me checking how many points Devin Booker had, and he thinks I was taking a picture of him and his tower. I look down and see this kind of, what are you smiling about, Jay? And oh, he thought I was taking his picture. Well, what matters in our hearts and in our lives? What's interesting in our hearts and in our lives? I was tempted to be omnipresent. I'm going to be with my son, and I'm going to be with ESPN.com. I was tempted to be omniscient. I'm going to know what's going on here, and I'm going to know about something that doesn't actually matter literally at all to anybody anywhere. And in doing so, I failed to love my neighbor. Basic command, Jesus following 101. And our inability to be present to the ones we're most basically called to love, like that is a new temptation in world history. So I said to my shame, but I hope you understand that that is something that nobody else in the world has had to steward before. You might daydream and your thoughts might wander, but only in the last couple of years is the most interesting thing happening in the whole world available to you to find out right now. And we end up following in the story, just like Adam, who was supposed to have dominion over the serpent, but the serpent has dominion over Adam. Just like Noah, who was supposed to have dominion over the creation, but the wine has dominion over him. And just like in Babel, they're supposed to have dominion over themselves, but instead they allow the technology to give them a haughtiness, a sense of greater than God. And so we tend to let our technology have dominion over us rather than have dominion over our technology. The algorithms are designed to keep you engaged for as long as possible so that ads can be put in front of your eyeballs so that they can make money off of you. That's their job. A profit motive is not a bad thing, but it's your job to not believe that your phone is here to serve you because your phone is trying to use you to make money. So, as followers of Jesus, if we can't do the basic thing of having dominion over our phones, the piece of technology that we carry with us like a pacifier and an umbilical cord, if I can't have dominion over this, then I'm not taking the warning of Genesis 11 seriously. Then I'm constructing my own little Tower of Babel all the time. No, I can be like God. That thing that Satan tried to tempt Eve with. Do you want to be like God? Eat of this apple. Do you want to be like God? Use your Apple device, conspiracy theorists. So if there's one thing that you need to thrive coming out of this message, it's you have to do what it takes to customize your notifications, put your phone in its rightful place, honor the Sabbath, don't be chronically available, don't let other people buy into the omniscience, omnipresence thing. Don't let people invade your household with their texts about random stuff that doesn't matter. Turn your phone on silent. Be present with the people in your life. But God intervenes, and this is a grace. This is a grace. God's intervention here. He's the same God then as he is now. And so what does God do? There's this patronizing language here in the text that I think is significant. So they're making a tower to go up to the heavens. And it says in Genesis 11, verse 5, and the Lord came down to see the city. Verse 7, come, let us go down there. that Father, Son, and Spirit have this conversation. They go like, look at their cute little project trying to be like us. It's this picture of the kids fighting in the back seat, whispering about, let's convince mom and dad to let us watch another movie. And mom and dad go like, I can hear you. You can't actually pull it over on us. And God's like, well, let's go on down there, see their cute little Be Like God project. How's it going down there? Fools. Yeah. That our attempts are really silly. And so there's this grace that comes with being humbled that God gives us in this text. See, our haughtiness requires humiliation if we're going to be cured. Right? If you are haughty, if you want to be humble, you have to be humiliated. That's part of the process. That Jesus goes, I see you doing that thing, and let me go on down there and go, it's actually not going to work. And I think about social media and digital technology just like this. We're going to have the most connected, productive society ever. And when everyone has access to the public square of the internet, then finally we'll be able to like connect and work together on things uninhibited by governments and bureaucracies. And instead, all we created was these hyperbaric little echo chambers of angry people online who are actually not being productive at all. That we're going to connect the whole world through the internet, and God goes, that sounds like a nice project. How's the confusion that you're experiencing? You can't even talk to someone now because the whole language, like I think about these words that get used across the scope of the internet, from like trauma to Christian nationalism to love. And people can't even talk about what does love mean. People can't talk about what is trauma. People can't talk about Christian because every little bubble has their own set of definitions for all these words, and people talk past each other and don't understand each other. And just like our technology project that was promised to create and facilitate human flourishing connected across the globe, the results are just like the Tower of Babel. We're as divided, as hostile, as anxious, as frustrated, as unable to partner together as we've ever been in world history, and yet we have the most access to technology and most opportunity to connect. Nice little project. I'm going to confuse your speech. Because God is going, the kingdom that will endure is my kingdom, and your humanist efforts to build the kingdom apart from me, I'm just going to frustrate them forever. It might feel like God's sabotaging a good project, but what he's doing is saying any good project divorced from me is actually a bad project. The whole point of the human project was to make much of God's glory, to make much of him as creator, to make much of him as the sole being worthy of worship in the whole world. And so if we're going to build a human society together apart from him, God's going to keep just knocking that over. One of my son's favorite things to do right now is we go on walks to the neighborhood, we find ant piles, and then we swipe them and watch the ants freak out. And we come back the next day, and they've built their ant hill again. And Jay goes, ha ha, silly ants. And they freak out. They come back the next day, and the ants are still there. Silly ants, and they freak out. I imagine that's how God is going, oh, you're going to build your world again without me? We think we're something, but we're like ants compared to the Lord of the universe. There's a grace of being humbled. There's also a grace of consequences here. Consequences are teachers. You know, the burned hand creates a student, as the phrase goes. That people go, let's try. Let's try to build a world apart from God. What could happen? What could go wrong? God comes up, says, actually, this consequence is a blessing. They go, let us create a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed. And then that word appears two more times in the text. Verse 8, so the Lord dispersed them. Verse 9, and there the Lord dispersed them. The very thing you're avoiding, God's going to create. You actually can't control the outcomes here. God's going to disperse you. That these consequences teach us. Again, I was pulling weeds this week around the edge of my pool, and my son was helping me pull weeds around the edge of my pool. And I say, don't fall in the pool, that water's cold. Careful around the edge of the water, that water's cold. Don't mess around the edge of the pool, water's cold. I'm pulling weeds. Splash! Got him out. Who's careful around the pool now? Consequences are teachers. They help us grow in wisdom. Some of the tremendous tension and online disagreement and the crumblings of the democratic process in liberal Western society, all of these things are God teaching us. Do you see that without me, you will not build a lasting, meaningful society? I don't care how enlightened you are. I don't care how much you believe in democracy or a democratic republic or whatever the institution is. That the whole human project, apart from God, He's going to keep swiping our anthill, and we're going to learn the hard way that the only things that last and matter are the things that are done under the kingdom of God. And the last piece is just the grace of divine intervention. I imagine these people are so mad. I was building this tower, and God comes down and makes their languages all confused. And it says, so they left off building the city. He's kind of like, forget this project. We're out. He spreads them out over the face of the earth. And the world has been developing these kind of tribal colonies ever since then. But God saves the people from doing the very thing they want. They're trying to build a life apart from God. And God says, you can't build a life apart from me. He intervenes. He stops. Like a child running to the street, and the mom or dad grabs them, and the toddler throws a tantrum. I was going into the street. I'm saving your life. You can't go that way. That's what divine intervention is. And you think about all this misuse of technology. Technology is good, it's been misused. And this really culminates. We see the culmination of this in the ultimate act of divine intervention, which is the crucifixion of Jesus. If you read the stories of how Jesus is killed, it's the misuse of a jury, a false trial, a good structure directed towards injustice. Then they engineer and fine craft this whip. And they know we can do this many lashes before they die. And so they hone in the technology over time, knowing we can do 39, but we can't do 40, because 40 is death, 39 keeps them hanging on. And the Romans, with their ingenuity, find how to ride that line of torturing someone as much as possible without them dying. Then the steel miners figure out how to get nails hard enough that they go through human bone, but not so hard that they splinter when hammered, and get it just right. And they find that if they hang someone like this and put a nail through their feet, you can get them to suffer a little longer because they can push up, take a breath, and then run out of energy, and then push up. And the Romans are engineers, innovators, creating this technology that facilitates suffering and death. And Christ literally bears into himself the punishment of our misdirected use of technology. That we who have misused technology to make a name for ourselves, or oppress, or subjugate, or dehumanize other people, Christ himself becomes the oppressed one, dehumanized and subjugated by technology of the oppressive government of Rome. And so our shame and frustration with our own tech use is ultimately seen as part of what contributes to us killing Jesus. And so us being good users of technology is no minor thing, because the Romans knew how to use technology to support their goals, and it was murderous. The question is, will we use technology to support things that cause human flourishing, that bring glory to the Lord, or that cause us to not love and to be separate from the people God has sent us to? Let me pray. Jesus, thank you for the opportunity to be makers, the opportunity to make technology. the opportunity to be involved. God, we want to turn from our misuse of technology. We want it to connect us to the people who we are called to love most. God, forgive us for the way that we've been obsessed with things that we have no power to contribute to the solution of. God, let us heed the warning of the Tower of Babel and make sure our efforts are directed to giving you glory, not ourselves. Amen.